Okay. I just got done watching part 4 we're on. I can't believe it's part 4 of Shane Dawson's Inside the Mind of Jake Paul, and he sat down with Nick Crompton, former manager. I don't even know. Well, who is Nick Crompton? He basically has helped to form Team 10 and help Jake get off the ground. He was the marketing person, but I don't know exactly what role he fulfilled, but it was really interesting sitting down with him. I'm going to give my reaction to some of the things that he said. We're still talking about if Jake Paul is a sociopath or not, and I have some things to say. So for starters, I don't know, I wasn't like enthralled or anything by this one, but maybe it's because, as Shane had mentioned in the beginning, like he's been hearing people say like, this is way too dramatic, this is too crazy, this is too much when we're talking about something like mental illness, and I think he took that feedback and kind of dialed it down a little bit for this one, because I didn't feel like on the edge of my seat trying to figure out what was going to happen. I did really enjoy this though. I especially appreciated that Nick sat down and he said, I'm not doing this unless Jake Paul is okay with it. And I thought that was a very nice gesture from him, considering that things probably didn't go down so well when he left Team 10. I think that just shows that he's a good person and he's not trying to cause any drama here or make anything any worse for anybody involved. And I'll just say again that I appreciate that Shane is talking to everybody. You know, we haven't spoken to Jake Paul and the Paul family yet, which I'm like waiting. Come on, Shane, let's do this. But the hearing from everybody else I think is important, and I'll get to something that Nick said that I think is especially important, which I talked about following the last episode, which finally like happened in this episode. Actually, let's just go straight into that, because this is a mental health channel. My channel is a mental health channel, and I always like to look at the mental health side of things. And this whole time we've been questioning, is Jake Paul a sociopath? And I've kind of had this feeling like probably not. I think this is just a lot of drama to make the series more appealing, which I'm okay with. I know a lot of people are not okay with that, but it's just sensationalism. It's just the way it's being done, and I don't think that Shane is trying to make a comment on people with antisocial personality disorder in general. Anyway, that's not what this is about. Maybe I'll talk about that at the end of this video for a minute. But Nick Crompton had said, or maybe he didn't say it, I don't remember, but in general, my feeling from Nick Crompton was that he does not really feel hurt by Jake. He doesn't feel like all the things that happened in the house and the pranks and everything hurt him. And I said in my reaction to the last episode is, when we see the things on camera and we see things on a screen, we have to recognize that we're not seeing the full picture, and the people who are being portrayed on the screen may not actually be reacting the way that they actually feel inside. So here, Nick has told us, like, it is what it is. It didn't really bother him. So I think it wouldn't be correct to say that Jake Paul's a sociopath, because clearly his actions didn't hurt Nick. Now, I do know that sometimes people get hurt by things and they say that they're not hurt, like they just don't know how to express their pain or they feel threatened or anything, but I didn't get that feeling from anything that Nick was saying or the way that he was behaving here. And I especially say that because Nick revealed here that most of what we've seen in Jake Paul's videos, or at least the stuff that I've seen in media clips and everything, has basically been fake. It has been determined beforehand what was going to happen. A lot of the pranks and the craziness and the stunts, they knew it was going to happen. Everybody involved knew what was going to happen before the camera started rolling. And this is why I've been saying this is actually a really interesting thing to be doing on YouTube, to be showing the behind the camera of somebody like this, because I think we don't always recognize when we're seeing somebody. When you're seeing me on camera, you're not seeing the full version of me. You're not seeing what happened to me that day. You're not seeing the thoughts that went through my head, the planning that went into how I wanted the video to look and everything. Like, I have notes here that I'm reading from because I want to make sure I get all the points that I want to get. But I chose those points very carefully, and it's apparently the same way in the Jake Paul house and the whole Jake Paul brand and the Paul family brand, I would even say, if we want to make this even larger. They have a plan behind what they're doing, and I don't want to say, I'll get into it in a minute, but most of it is determined. They know what's happening. I wouldn't think that they would intentionally put people in harm's way or danger knowing that that would hurt the company and the brand and the investors and everything else that's going on. And, I just generally think that most people are decent human beings and they would never intentionally try to harm somebody. So I think it's good that Nick revealed here that it's mostly fake. I know that he was concerned about hurting the people who believe it could be real, who want to believe it's real, who see Jake as maybe like a brother figure or a father figure or a friend. But I don't think that knowing that it's fake has to take away from that. I do have other conflicting important thoughts, though, when it comes to the fakeness and what we see on camera. Because, yes, a lot of what we saw in these videos, everyone knew what was going to happen. But I don't think that they actually had, like, scripts for every video. I don't think they were, like, reading off lines and, like, staging exactly where everyone was going to stand. I'm sure that happened sometimes, but I think sometimes it was probably a little chaotic and little improv'd. And Nick said that they all were living in the house, himself included, and when you live in a house together with people and you work as hard as I believe that most of these people probably were working, you're bound to get on each other's nerves. Things are bound, you're bound to have conflict. It's just natural to have conflict when you have a lot of different personalities under one roof, especially living together. So even though we could say, everybody knew what was going on, I do think there's probably things that happened that were happening spur of the moment. Like, they just happened. And I think that people probably did get hurt sometimes. I think just like anybody living in a house together it would happen. People get hurt. I think we can't just say everything was fake and use that as an excuse for the behaviors going on. And this is where I feel a little conflicted, because I think, there are some things that Jake did and the Team 10 did and whatever that were dangerous, whether they had permission to do them or not, whether everybody involved knew it was going to happen or not. I still think that they're dangerous, and I still think they give an example to people watching who might think it's real that these things are okay when they're really not okay. So I don't feel like 100% great about this. When we look at people like the Martinez twins and how they left, and Nick was saying, well, they knew everything was happening. They knew they were going to destroy the room. Like, okay, yeah, they might have known that. But at the same time, you can't help but take some things personally, even if they're being scripted. Like, why were the Martinez twins chose to be the ones to have their room destroyed? I don't know. Like, we don't know how they felt. We didn't talk to them. All we know is that video that they put out. And I don't think we can just discount everything that they're saying because it was fake, because not everything is fake. We are human beings. And I really want to bring back something that I talked about when I reacted to the last episode about the family, about Jake Paul, enmeshment. Enmeshment, I mentioned, is when roles get blurry and boundaries get blurry, and I said maybe some of that could be going on in the Paul family. Well, when you work in a reality show like this, I've never worked on a reality show, but sometimes it kind of feels like this could be one. But not really, I'm kidding. But, being in front of a camera is a little weird. And I think when it's a reality show and you're actually living together, like, the roles are blurred. Yes, Nick said nobody was actually cast, right? So they weren't signing up for roles as actors. They were still coming as their genuine selves and reacting to things as their genuine selves, which makes it more real and makes it more believable and makes for good entertainment, I guess. But at the same time, the role of what you're doing in that house gets blurred because, okay, obviously everybody's going to act differently when the cameras are off, but how do I put it? You can't disentangle completely your personality and your reactions to things and your emotions from your job. Anybody who's worked at a job for a really long time, worked very hard on it, and has a personality in the public eye, you can't disentangle everything. So even though we're not talking about a family situation, which is the context that you would normally look at something and say this is enmeshment, I do think that you could also apply the concept here to coworkers, and Nick did describe them as a family, so it's not that far-fetched to say maybe some roles were blurred and things weren't so clear and boundaries and emotions weren't expressed well and there was confusion. So Nick mentioned not liking Jake Paul's dad, Greg. And I have not really been a fan of Greg either from the things that I've seen, but as I've been saying this whole time, I'm only seeing the little window of videos and things that I am presented with that the family has chosen to show us, maybe to portray a certain kind of a character. Maybe Greg is supposed to be somebody that I'm supposed to hate, you know? There are evil villains when we have fictional stories, and maybe he's supposed to be an evil villain and we're not supposed to like him, and we're supposed to be shocked and outraged when he does things. Now, I don't know why Nick doesn't like Greg. I mean, he mentioned a few things, so I don't want to speculate on Nick and his personal feelings about anything. You know, just like he didn't really want to speculate about Jake, I want to extend that same courtesy to him. He's allowed to speak for himself, and I can't put words in his mouth. He did mention that he didn't like how Greg kind of like stepped in and took over Team 10, and he felt like the entire environment changed. Personally, I wouldn't read into that too much. I can understand why that may make him feel a certain way, and why he would be upset and everything about that makes total sense to me. But I also wouldn't read too much into it personally, because when you have parents and sons and there's a business involved, you know, as he mentioned, and as talking about the enmeshment that I talked about, we can also apply this to enmeshment. It gets a little confusing when you have family relations and business, and the roles get a little bit more confusing when you're working together. Now, I don't know what Greg's reason was for stepping in, but I think it's totally normal and acceptable that he would want to step in and see what's going on with his son in the business and try to take some control and ownership of what's going on. Again, there could be a lot of details that were being left out that we don't know about. I totally understand why Nick might feel a certain way about it, but I wouldn't be overly concerned. You know, Jake has been kind of painting Greg Paul as this evil father figure who's been controlling of his son and whatnot, and I don't have an opinion either way on that. It's definitely possible that that's something that's going on. It's also possible that that's just the way that he wants to portray himself, and he's the evil character. So I don't have an opinion until we talk to Greg Paul and we talk to Jake Paul and we find out what they both think about each other. Here's a big question. Is Team 10 a cult? No. I really think that Shane brought this up just to add like more dramatic effect, and I think personally I think that's okay. I think Shane is just being dramatic. That's his brand, that's what he does, and it makes for good entertainment. But Team 10 is so not a cult, okay? First of all, having rules for the house. Shane tried to like sneak in there, oh, weren't there all these rules? And Nick was like, well, in the beginning, but they kind of like stopped doing the rules. But having rules does not make a cult. You're allowed to run a house with a set of rules. Like, it only makes sense to have rules in a house. Remember boundaries I was talking about? You should have boundaries. You should have defined roles and an understanding of how things are going to go. And technically, it is a business, so they're protecting their assets, they're protecting their brand, and they're protecting the company, which is for the good of the entire company, including the employees and the people who are on Team 10. So it just makes sense to me that there would be rules. I would never say that they have a cult because there are rules. And it seemed to me like everybody was free to leave whenever they wanted to leave. Everybody on Team 10 seemed to be leaving around the same time, which I didn't really understand as an outsider, and maybe we'll find out a little bit more about. But it seemed like they were free to leave. Nobody was holding them hostage there. Nobody was coercing them to stay. We didn't hear any like crazy stories of manipulation and, you know, holding them captivity or kidnapping them or anything. Basically, I just didn't see coercion, and I would feel like if we're going to call something a cult, there needs to be some kind of coercion. I just don't see that. Now, I know that Nick had mentioned that once he left, Jake had basically cut off communication with him, and he said that that was true for other members of Team 10. That doesn't entirely concern me. I will get to why it does concern me a little bit, but you know, sometimes when there's a business and somebody leaves, it's best to just not talk anymore. You know, again, yes, they were friends, but this is where the roles are mixed. They were also working for Jake or working for the company. I don't know what the parent company is here for Jake Paul. I guess I could look that up. But they were employees. And, you know, when you leave a job, do you expect that your boss or your employer's definitely gonna have to, like, keep in touch with you? No. You know, I just think it's normal for when somebody leaves a business like that, you know, maybe there just isn't time to communicate, because I imagine for a production like Team 10, they have to be working all the time. I just can't imagine that there's like a lot of downtime, and it may just be hard to reach out and connect with somebody who left and who also, I know Nick said that he tried to leave on good terms, but you don't really know how people take things. Maybe Jake did feel personally like it wasn't so great. Maybe there are something in the contract that kind of like forbids communication. Things get tricky when there's a business. And again, I don't want to put false stuff out there, and I don't want to put words in Nick's mouth here, but I just feel like there could be more complicated reasons than we are hearing for why Jake never reached out to him. Now, I do want to say that it's still really shitty to not answer texts and to not be friendly with somebody who left and who tried to do it on good terms. Nick had mentioned how Jake sometimes seemed to have problems with processing emotions and expressing himself. So if that's true, then it doesn't really surprise me that he didn't answer. But I've talked on my channel quite a few times about like ghosting and just shutting somebody off and how horrible you can feel, because even in a friendship, even if it's not an intimate relationship, like a deep personal relationship, even if it's just a friendship, it hurts. It hurts a lot. We have a system in our body that reacts when somebody leaves us, the panic and the grief system. And that system, first we freak out, and maybe, Jake was freaking out because he felt like Nick was leaving, because Nick actually was leaving. But then there's also this period of sadness for both of them, because it's disappointing to feel like things didn't work out. It's disappointing to not continue when I think they probably were both enjoying what they were doing. But at the same time, I also want to remind everybody here, Jake is still pretty young, and maybe he just doesn't know how to process emotions that well. Like, that's a normal thing during that time of life. I did not know how to process my emotions probably until way beyond Jake's age, so I can't really look down on him for this. Again, it's kind of shitty, but it's not the worst thing in the world. And it certainly doesn't tell me that Jake is like a sociopath or something. Now, I do think that it's very relatable that Jake has trouble processing emotions. I think most people at some point in their lives have had a hard time communicating difficult feelings. I don't think there's anything really weird about that. And to kind of riff off of a point that I made reacting to the last episode about Jake's family, the family's divorced. And as I mentioned, divorce is hard for everybody involved. And if this was something that happened when Jake was younger, even if it happened today, Jake is still developing his brain is still developing. From what I recall, brains continue developing until you're 26, and they still develop further from that, but that's like the bulk of your brain figuring out what it needs to do. And, if a divorce happened in the middle of your brain developing, I went through this myself, it really interrupts things, and it makes things really hard, and you have these really strong, difficult emotions that are like swirling around in these complicated situations that you have to figure out how to deal with, and you don't necessarily feel like you can rely on your parents to help you through it because they're going through their own stuff, and there's all kinds of thoughts that run through your head. Like, it's just a mess. So it does not one bit surprise me that Jake might have trouble processing emotions, and maybe that's something that Shane will talk with Jake a little bit about. All right, something else that Nick had mentioned that he was concerned about, which has actually been my primary concern, I think, when I think about the Paul brothers and the Paul family, was this whole one-upping thing that Jake and Logan kind of had this like feud going on between the two of them, and they felt like maybe it was unspoken, I don't know, but it was kind of this thing like, I have to do better than the other brother, and I have to be more outrageous and more crazy and do something more shocking. And I understand the competitiveness and the drama. It all makes for views and it makes for good business. But at the same time, that when something like that is unchecked and you have young people, I know that there are other people involved. It's not just the family. Like, we're forgetting that there are employees and there are cameramen and film crews and everything. So it's not like they're totally alone in all of this. But when you have that competitive thing going and everybody has a stake in it because it is a business, constantly one-upping and one-upping and one-upping and one-upping and one-upping, like, where's the limit? Where's the boundary? When does something become not okay to do anymore? And I sometimes wonder, did they have a boundary? Because some of the things that they did, I remember being like, this is way too far. This is not okay. And knowing that his audience is a young audience, a very impressionable audience, I thought, like, what are you putting into their minds? How could we say that this definitely, like, is not positive mental health? Now, again, I'm not saying that anybody here is a sociopath, but the behaviors, when you don't know that they're fake, are sociopathic behaviors, some of them. Some of the things that they did were very dangerous. Some of the things they did were very scary, and that's part of what made them shocking. But at the same time, if you've got people who are believing it, like, where's the line here? And I always kind of felt like there's no line, and this is just going to keep going, and nobody's stepping in and putting down a boundary and putting down consequences, and that is scary. And I agree with Nick here, like, it's dangerous. Now, I don't know how long Nick had that concern. He just mentioned that it was a concern of his, but it's a little scary. I imagine that there were high, intense emotions constantly on the Team 10 set. I'm going to call it a set instead of a house, even though they were living in it as a real house. I think that makes it worse. I think having all the personal stuff and living in it, like, it just makes it way more complicated, and I can see how it can get scary really fast when those lines are blurred and when there is enmeshment and we're really not entirely sure all the time what is real and what is fake. That's my concern. So they talked about the whopper to me, like the big one, Alyssa Violet hooking up with Logan Paul. And I had to go back and watch this again because I was planning my little notes here and I was like, that's really bad. That's hard. I think anybody could see that's really horrible to do to anybody, let alone your brother, and film it and, like, put it out on the internet. Like, it's just disgusting behavior. Like, nobody should look at that and think that's positive. But I was going back and I was looking at the talk he had with Nick, and I was like, okay, well, they're saying hooked up with. What does hooked up with mean? We all, of course, are thinking in our heads like, well, that means they had sex, right? But does it? I mean, Alyssa said in the song that she did, I believe, that he was a better kisser. Okay, but again, she just said that. I believe they have kissed on video before. I don't follow these people. I'm sorry. But okay, but we don't know. We really don't know if they had sex. And I know that Shane said something about, like, they would be really messed up if your brother's ex-girlfriend. And Nick kind of said, like, yeah, that would be messed up. But he never confirmed that that's actually what happened. He said hooking up was real. But did they hook up to make a video to kind of rub some dirt in Jake's face, which still isn't great, but I'm not exactly sure of what happened still. That's where I'm at. And I think it's good that he's gonna talk with Alyssa and she's gonna get her side of the story out, because I really want to know whether we can trust what she says or not. Who knows? That's kind of what we're doing here. We're exploring everybody's perspective and what everybody thinks, but I am eager to find out what she has to say, knowing that she did have an intimate relationship with Jake, more so than friends, more so than just an employer. Like, she probably got to see a deeper side of Jake than Nick and the other members of Team 10. So I'm just curious to see what she says. I'm not interested in making more drama out of anything, but I'd like to see. Now, Shane showed a teaser for a future episode. We don't really know if it's the next one, but he was contemplating putting a secret camera, or he was contemplating leaving the camera on, which, yeah, that's a little bit unethical. And he never really said whether he was going to do that or not, but he did say he would ask for permission to use the footage. So, I mean, as long as the footage gets deleted, if Jake doesn't want it out there, I do think that's okay. It's still a violation of trust, but I do think it's okay. I do think, I kind of agree with what Shane was saying. I think that Jake gave him free rein to do whatever he wanted, and I don't think that would be off the table. So We'll find out if he uses the footage. I'm pretty sure he does, otherwise he wouldn't really mention it. But then there was also this idea of Katie, the licensed therapist, Katie Morton, going undercover as his producer. And I know people are going to freak out about this because they freaked out about the way she described sociopaths and saying that she feels icky and gross around them. And personally, I'm okay with that. I don't want to get too far into it, but like I think it's okay to express how you feel around somebody with a personality disorder or with any kind of disorder. I know people say, well, she's a therapist and her clients are going to think that she's thinking all of them are gross, but she's just communicating what she feels. It's countertransference. Like, that's normal. And I know that a lot of people were upset with Katie about the statistics and was she lying? No, she was not lying. I put a study for where she got the number when I reacted to that video, or where she probably got the number. She maybe was embellishing things a little bit. Maybe she was stretching the truth, but this is a Shane Dawson series, and that's what he does. He's dramatic. I don't think it was inappropriate of her to, in a non-clinical setting, not diagnosing somebody, just talk about sociopaths in general and talk about her own feelings of countertransference when she's around people who have these traits. That is appropriate. That is normal. That is what somebody who isn't enabling, who is showing somebody the truth about themselves and how they affect other people, acts. I actually do not think it's inappropriate for a therapist to tell a client, you know what? You make me feel really bad right now. I don't like the things that you're doing. Now, I understand that you only do that when a client's ready to hear that kind of thing, when you know that they have enough ground to stand on, that they can handle it. However, they weren't commenting on a specific person, so I just feel like we should give her a little bit more lenience here. Now, as far as, sneaking in and being a producer and not being a therapist, again, Jake Paul agreed to everything, and he seemed to have like a no-holds-barred agreement, understanding that this was going to be about questioning his mental health and whether or not he was a sociopath. I really don't think that anything appropriate is going on here, but I know that people are going to get upset about it and there's going to be drama, so I guess we'll see what it is and we'll see how I react to it. You probably know how I'm going to react to it by my reaction here, but I'm curious to see where else this takes us. It's kind of interesting how it's rattling up the whole YouTube community in general, and people who talk about mental health on YouTube have all kinds of different opinions about it. I just think it's good that we're talking, maybe, and we'll see. What do you think about everything, especially in this episode, what Nick revealed? Do you think that Alyssa did something with Logan? Do you have information that I don't have? Let me know down below in the comments. Let's talk about it.